Today I'm joined with Erin Friday. Erin, it is great to talk to you today. You have an incredible story. I've been following some of your testimony in California, and I'm hoping that you'll just share what's happened in your life and why it is that you're so concerned about the transgender ideology.
Sure. Thank you, Erin, for having me. So I guess the background in my story is that when my daughter was in seventh grade, she took the California uh, comprehensive sex curriculum. They learned, sex ed, and um, I was a volunteer at the school. I knew every teacher by name. I had drinks with the teachers. I got the volunteer award that year. That's how much I was at the school. So I trusted the school to teach my child um, appropriately, age appropriate information about sex ed and what she needed to know. Instead, what I learned is that the sex ed curriculum is not actually taught by the teachers themselves. They hired third parties to come in and teach it. And whether the real teachers are there or not, I don't know. But the fallout was that my daughter and five of her friends came over to my house, and they were all sitting in the front yard talking about their labels. Each one of them had picked uh, a label on the alphabet, and then some other labels that I didn't even know what they meant. So we had polyamorous, pansexual, lesbian, um, asexual, and I thought, wow, like where
What
is this
happened?
coming from?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
she's 11. She's 11,
Wow.
um, and
Yeah,
so
11-year-olds shouldn't be thinking about their sexual orientation unless they've been sexualized.
right, exactly. And when I questioned her about it too, I got kind of the, oh, you're a Karen, you're old, you don't understand. I thought that's really odd. Actually, I understand way more than you do. You're 11. Um,
And
but
that
she was
label
right.
Karen, I was thinking about it this morning, how we're just dismissed if we disagree, in a way that no other population is. We're called TERFs, we're called Karens, bigots. We're just dismissed if we don't go along with this. And the kids are encouraged to label us as such.
That's exactly right. And I think it's the in I call it the internet parenting. The internet has usurped our power as parents. Um, it used to be when I was growing up. I'm about your age, Erin, and the people that we turn to, it wasn't necessarily our parents that we turn to for advice. It might be our friend group, but it's a friend group that actually knows us. And so if I were to make a poor decision or decide I'm going to steal my parents' car and drive to the beach or something like that, one of my friends would say,
Yeah.
do you think that's a bad idea? Uh, but nowadays, you can put any idea out there in the internet and everybody will cheerlead you back because they don't know you and they don't really care what the fallout is. And so I call it internet parenting because the kids go out to the blogosphere or the internet, social media, and ask the questions that they really should be asking their parents, their aunts and uncles, their actual friends, people who know them. Um, so, yeah.
And there are
Um,
plenty of adults out there who are glad to step in the role of glitter mom, and not only that, but uh, people who want to quote unquote crack eggs, which is a euphemistic term for um, turning a child on to transgenderism.
yeah, and it's not just adults who are doing it.
Right.
Certainly not in my case. Um, so with my daughter, she ended up in some chat forums and actually meeting people in person, and they were older, a couple years older, a cool 16-year-old. Who doesn't want to be friends with a cool 16-year-old? And it was that person who was really pushing the trans identity on my child.
So she had sex ed at school, came home, she and her friend group decided on these identities. What did she decide upon?
Well, first she picked pansexual because that, of course, is the nicest
Mhm.
label. And my daughter's really nice and sweet and inclusive. So pansexual means you like everybody all the time, no judgment. A very progressive, in the moment label that everyone's pushing for now with the hyper inclusion theory that's floating around. So she picked that. And I was worried why all these girls, and there's a demographic. These are all they were all white, they were all middle class to upper class. And they, to me, there's also this desire not to be the oppressor, not to fall within that category, and also to pick some kind of label that puts you into the victimization box, or marginalized, because that way you get to you get to first of all complain, and you get to not be the bad guy.
You're no longer a cis het white oppressor.
Correct. And when I asked her whether anybody was straight, she looked at me like, I just asked if you like the color tan. Do you want everything tan? I mean, it was repulsive to be straight. And I'm not going to use the term cis because I don't
Yeah, I find it really offensive. I've increasingly been seeing, calls to decolonize from the cis het patriarchy. And there's so much of this that kids are being exposed to. So for those who don't know, cis is what I view as a derogatory term that implies somebody is 100% comfortable with their sexed body, which I've never met anybody who fits that description. So I think it's absurd, but it's also, as you said, very, very negative. Like, oh, you're cis. Ugh, you're one of those oppressors.
Yeah, and you're boring. I mean, that was another component.
Yeah, you're gray. Yeah,
you're boring. There's nothing exciting about you. So that was 7th grade, and I went to the parent class on sex ed then because I was like, wow, what did she learn? And I was really aghast about when I sat through the class. They talked about they showed the genderbread man. They talked about the scale of woman to man, and of course this was insane. The ultimate woman is Barbie and the ultimate man is GI Joe, and everybody else is somewhere in between. So me being
so
kind
offensive.
of yeah and ridiculous, like, I mean, just insipid. So I just kept raising my hand. I'm like, oh, so does that mean I'm trans? Because I'm somewhere in the middle, and I like guy things, and I play boy sports, and so what am I? Where's my label? And they had a sheet too. It was an 8x11 or 8.5x11 sheet of all the labels you could be. And again, I sat there apoplectic and said, I raised my kids to just be. We don't put labels. I don't have a label. I don't want to put myself in a box. That's what a parent is supposed to do is to give the child the world, and let them have freedom. So you are Erin and I am Erin, and that's all you need to know. That's it. Yep. And I was shut down in the meeting.
Yeah, I was wondering how they responded to you, because they're probably used to people just sort of going along with it. I guess they just assumed you were a Karen, and
well, they just kept saying, we'll take your questions at the end. We'll take your questions at the end.
Okay.
And I just kept raising my hand, and I was rude. I have to admit it. I was interrupting. I'm like, that makes no sense. You want me to introduce myself with pronouns to a 5th grader? That makes no sense to me. This is illogical. And looking around in the classroom too, I mean, there were leaders of Girl Scout troops and Boy Scout troops and teachers and parents. And I'm like, why are you just sitting here nodding your head? Because this is gobbledygook. Like none of it makes sense.
It's so great that you pushed back on it though, because so many people are afraid to, and that might have just started a seed in other people's, thoughts that, yeah, this is gobbledygook. This makes no sense. This is antithetical to science and logic and, common sense.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't know what I was walking myself into either. I
Okay,
didn't
so
know this
you
was
weren't, so this was how long ago?
this was 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So I was clueless that I was even walking into the hornet's nest.
I'm so
Um,
sorry. I can't even imagine how befuddling that must have been.
yeah, well, I think it was good because I didn't know that I should keep my mouth shut because I think, and so I didn't. So I think it actually had a good effect. But yeah, so fast forward a little bit, puberty hits. Puberty is, especially for females, I mean, we know this, we're females. Puberty is not the most amazing time in a girl's life. Um, Boys have it much easier. I have two children, and they're not far apart in age. And boy, the difference in the joy and the distress with puberty is sex based. um, Girls get hips, girls get breasts, girls get periods. Nobody's excited about a period. I don't know any woman that's like, yay.
Yeah, I get to have cramps and feel crummy for 3 or 4 days and worry about bleeding through. And yeah, it's not fun. It's not something that, I mean, there are a lot of things about, I mean, getting hair in places, there's starting to get body odor and getting teased for that. There's all kinds of things that happen. Boys do, it seems like, sail through it a lot easier. And of course there are some boys that struggle a little bit, but the changes that they have to go through are so much more gradual and so much more gentle, I feel like.
Well, and they also happen later
Mhm.
when they're older. So girls, 12 and 11, they're still little girls.
Yeah.
I mean, they are still wanting to go to Build-A-Bear and um,
Yeah, they're still giggling and watching cartoons and yeah.
exactly. And they are foisted into almost just, into a sexual world that they're not ready for. When I say sexual world, it's just because their body becomes sexualized, and you can't help but notice the looks that you get from men, and it makes girls feel uncomfortable. I mean, many girls are uncomfortable. I know I wore giant sweatshirts when I started to get breasts, and so did all my friends. We were trying to hide them. Very natural. And now these kids are told, well, if you're hiding your breasts, if you don't want to show them off, well, then you are gender dysphoric and you are actually a boy or trans.
What a bizarre message. Especially coming from the schools, every time I hear it, it just, it's stunning to me that this is being taught in schools.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I actually went back in time and I looked at the curricula that my daughter was exposed to, and it has a little cartoon boy, and then it has a brain, and then it has an arrow pointing to it that says female. So it just tells you right there, you can be male and have a girl brain, and it's just not scientific.
And of course, a girl brain means you like shopping and doing cartwheels and all these very yeah, it's just, ugh. And I think about when I think in 6th grade, we had some sex ed and they separated the boys and girls, and there was sort of an uncomfortable talk about the physiology of puberty. And we got a book and we got some information about how to use feminine hygiene products. And that was about it. And that was enough in 6th grade.
Well, you know what they do here in California? It's 5 hours.
Oh my gosh.
So it's not just, well, and let's back up, because they get it 3 times. So they get the puberty talk, and my kids were older, so they missed the puberty thing, at least I believe so. But at puberty, so they get it in 5th grade. And of course it's co-ed, which is just really uncomfortable. And they get the gender, the gender woo-woo or ideology in 5th grade. They get a second dose of it in 7th grade. And again, 5 hours, 1 hour just dedicated to gender identity. And then they get a third dose in 9th grade.
Wow.
And that class in 9th grade is 10 hours long.
Oh my gosh. That's insane.
What can you possibly teach for 10 hours long? You're teaching an ideology.
Yes. And
Your
that's to be clear, that's what this is. This is an ideology.
Right.
The more I look at it, the more I'm like, this is a religious belief. There's nothing about this that's based in science or fact. It's a belief system, and there's no reason for us to be indoctrinating children into a belief system, especially one that results in harms. So your daughter in 7th grade started puberty and
went through the normal teenage angst. The friend groups come, they go. I mean, this is, again, very typical what happens 12 and 13. I think it's probably the roughest time in a kid's life. Kids start getting mean. Everybody gets bullied. It's not just one kid. Every kid gets bullied. I was bullied. Erin, you were bullied. Yes. There's not a person on this planet that wasn't bullied.
If I ever hear someone say they wish they could go back to middle school, I would think they were crazy.
No one says that. Middle school is rough. Middle school is really rough. And so, and then she, like I said, she started, it's pandemic time, right? So she's online a lot, and she's being influenced by an older girl, and she's, now kids have language for her. So she's a strong female, and they said, oh, you're bossy, so you must be a boy. You're the one who always comes up with the fun games. You must be a boy.
Oh,
I know. It's infuriating, but these are other kids doing it, and they're not doing it out of spite. They're doing it because they were taught that by school or by the internet, that this is, Erin, I'm sure you've done this. You can go on the internet and type in, am I trans? And you'll come up with these questionnaires. I mean, I haven't found a questionnaire yet that hasn't said that I'm trans. And I've passed with flying colors. Like, I am like ultimate trans.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's such a thing.
Yeah. I don't like women's clothes, and I don't like to shop, and I like, I like to play in the dirt, and I'm not particularly organized or clean. And all these things that, I don't mind getting my hands dirty. These are all, of course I'm a boy, of course I'm a male. And that's probably why we're so upset about this, Erin, because we've got internalized transphobia because we're actually trans. And if we just let our true trans self come out, we'd stop being so hateful and bigoted.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I actually put out a picture of myself in 8th grade. I left it on my desk. I blew it up so my daughter could see how much of a boy I look like. I wore, now I'm really aging myself, tough skins and flannel shirts. And I had a Dorothy Hamill haircut that made me look exactly like a boy. And my daughter said, who's that? I'm like, that's me. See, I was a boy too.
Yeah. I outgrew it somehow, even though it's innate.
Exactly. Well, because it's fluid when they want it to be fluid, and it's innate and mutable when they want it to, or immutable when they want it to be. So, it's all double speak. We know that. You do an excellent job of debunking all the double speak. So as she entered COVID was rough. Again, online. And she came out then as lesbian, and whoop-de-doo, I'm in California, nobody cares.
I'd be more like, well, are you actually involved with you have a girlfriend, or are you just, is this just sort of a label that you've picked for yourself?
Right. And I think some of that too, again, because they give these kids words. And I don't know about you, Erin, but I had girl crushes. I had major girl
Oh
crushes.
yeah. I experimented with girls. I mean, yeah, I think
But
that
I
that's
didn't even have sexual crushes, which is fine. But I
right.
had, like, I wanted to be certain girls in my school because they were smart and really good at sports, and I just wanted to be them. And if somebody gave me different language, I would have been like, oh
Oh, you're
yeah,
a lesbian. Ah,
right,
yeah.
right. So I take all this stuff with a grain of salt. And
And
again, it's
actually, I have heard, especially from autistic girls, that the message that they're getting is that if they really like a girl, it means they're a lesbian, and they don't have those social skills to sort of parse out, no, this is a friendship. This is what friendship looks like.
right, right. Not that it matters. I mean, again, not
Right.
that
Not that it matters, but when,
not that it
when you're
matters.
talking about 10, 11-year-old kids, it would be nice if they weren't assuming a sexualized identity.
And it kind of goes into, now they're saying that 20% of all high schoolers fall within the alphabet. Well, they're falling within the alphabet because they can't distinguish between admiration and attraction.
Right.
Or, you know,
Or they're queer
the
because they don't really fit anywhere else, but they don't want to be considered normal.
right, right, or asexual because, well, I mean, and asexual to me makes a lot of sense because I don't want to go to the rabbit hole with porn, but I mean, you look at you look at porn, and again, I'm aging myself, but we had Playboy.
Yeah.
We had, I mean, if you could get a hold of a VCR tape of porn, it was
Yeah.
nothing like what you
I
see.
think I was in college before I really saw some, video porn. Um, it wasn't out there.
No, you had to walk into the triple X stores. I mean, it was seedy. It wasn't in your hand. It wasn't on your phone, and it wasn't available 24/7. And it also wasn't all fetish. I mean, I would take a bet that you can't find regular porn, if I can even call that. But I mean, you go to Pornhub and everything is a fetish.
Mhm. and and
Everything.
and crazy fetishes. I mean, just
Right.
things that are you know you want to see a girl licking urine off the floor, here's a
Oh,
video for you. You want to see a woman being spit upon, here you go. How about choked? Let's choke the women, here you go.
yeah.
Hair pulling. I mean, it's really degrading in a way that yeah, if you were a young person watching that, I can see you saying, well, yeah.
I'm out. I'm out. I'm
Wow.
nothing. I
Yeah.
don't want anything. I mean, I
Or on
remember.
the other end, if you're sort of a typical kid who hasn't developed sexualized feelings yet, which is sort of where we want kids when they're 10 or 11, then they're also saying they're asexual and kind of putting themselves in that box without realizing perhaps they just haven't, gone through that experience of having fallen in love with someone or having those sexual feelings. And the other thing that I think about is that if kids are on antidepressants often subvert that sexual drive. And so those kids might decide they're asexual because the antidepressants are undermining their physiology. So there are all kinds of reasons somebody could, decide that they're asexual.
Yeah. 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 I'm sure you did this too. Maybe you didn't, but as soon as I knew what actual sex was, I was like, yeah, I'm adopting. you know,
You're what? Oh,
I'm
adopt. Oh,
adopting.
I
Oh,
was,
I'm out.
yeah,
Like,
see, I was sexualized very young. So I was quite sexual when in sixth grade, I was having, intercourse. So I was the kid that you don't want your kid to be because I was sexualized, and it's not healthy. I can, it's girl bodies that age are not built to be sexualized, to be having intercourse.
wow. Yeah. And wow, thanks for sharing that. That's yeah, and your mind. That's the
Yeah,
most
yeah,
important part. Your mind. You're not mature enough
right.
to handle what is happening to your body.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, you
And
know.
so at what point did she decide she was a boy?
So she decided right before ninth grade, and it was, it was like the pie in the face, or the like, did not see this one coming. Uh, I hate to even say, well, when she was a girl, when she was a young girl, I mean, she was into dollhouses and Shopkins and American Girl doll stuff. And I mean, I'm such a tomboy myself that I would set a timer when I'd go to the American Girl doll store because I couldn't stand being in there. But
Hilarious.
yeah, so yeah, I mean, very typical girl, and then decided she was trans, and I found that out, in the most amazing way when I walked into her Zoom class, her on Zoom, and finding out that her high school was calling her a male name. Yeah, that was pretty interesting, especially in light of the fact that the school had never set physical eyes on my daughter. She had never stepped foot in the school. Um,
Wow. So how did you respond to that?
Not appropriately. I again, I didn't know that there was all this uh, turf anti-trans phobia, all this like that I could have lost my job. I didn't know, that what I was walking myself into. I just did what I thought as a parent I should do, and as an attorney, I called them and I read them the riot act. How dare you?
Mhm.
How
That seems
dare
very
you?
appropriate. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I guess I wasn't. I wasn't thinking about what the repercussions would be of doing something like this, but I called the administration. I laid into them as hard as I could, and they like acted as if they were doing my daughter a favor, and they're like, "Well, we didn't change your legal name." And I said, "Well, no, sorry, can I curse? No shit, Sherlock, you can't. I'm the
wow.
I'm the parent. Just so we're clear
Just
on
so we're
that,
clear. Yeah. Just,
I am the parent of this
wow.
child." And uh, a few
So,
days
so
later,
now they're going to label you unsafe.
oh, for sure, because CPS showed up at my house.
You're kidding.
No,
Oh,
no,
Erin.
no,
So,
it's okay. It's okay. I think, yeah, like I said, I didn't know what the potential fallout could be, and it was handled pretty well. I think, she left pretty quickly, but I made missteps there too. I never should have let her into my house.
but I mean, you must have been taken aback.
I was, but what the school did, so, truth be told here, what the school did is they claimed that my daughter was suicidal, and that's why they sent CPS. So what they had done is they had looked at my daughter's search history, and she had looked up how many monster drinks it takes to kill a 110-pound person. And so they used that as their hook to send CPS to my house. Now, do I believe that they really believed my daughter was suicidal? I question that, because the timing was when I went apoplectic on the administration for changing my daughter's name. So I'll never know the answer to that. But I'll tell you, I pulled my daughter from that school immediately.
Good. And
We were
that's what
done.
we tell parents. We say, you've got to pull them from school. You've got to cut off social media, and you need to get different peers. Those are the two things. And it's very hard. How did your daughter respond? I'm guessing she wasn't particularly pleased with you.
No, she wasn't pleased with me at all. We got her a therapist, which again, you know all this stuff, Erin, because I was walking in uncharted territory. I had no idea what I was doing, and I got her a therapist. That therapist affirmed.
So sorry.
Yeah,
You're sort of one of the forefront, because now I think parents there's more information out there. But when you were going through this, I think you were probably one of the first parents having to grapple with this.
yeah, I was going blind.
Yeah.
And but luckily, I mean, I was just so blessed, because Abigail Schreier's book came out that month, and
Okay, so you at least knew you weren't crazy.
I knew I wasn't crazy, and I had a really good friend, who I spoke with about this, and she gave me the number of two moms who were going through this, and they were taking they were taking opposite tacks to each other, and one was full board affirming, and one was fighting tooth and nail. And I, of course, resonated with the one who was fighting tooth and nail. So I did have some guidance as I started to enter the real foray of this. But yeah, I did know going in, that possibly CPS could show up at my house. But now I know.
Well,
Now I
and
warn.
these days we're hearing stories of children being taken away from parents because they're not quote unquote affirming or quote unquote safe. And so in a way, the fact that you were on the forefront of this was somewhat protective because they weren't to the point where they were removing children because parents weren't affirming them.
No, that's not actually true, Erin.
Really?
They are, they were removing
Really?
parents or
Wow.
children. Yeah. Yeah, because I joined a couple parent groups, and I found out pretty quickly, that it was happening in Arizona.
Wow. So this has been
There's
going on for
Yeah,
3-4 years now. Okay.
yeah,
Because
and there's a
I've
couple
been
parents.
hearing stories about um, parents, CPS being called, parents losing custody, but it's just been the last, little while. So,
So the way CPS removes the child, and may have changed and gotten worse, but is through through a custody battle. So CPS will then come in and of course testify for the affirming parent.
right.
Teachers will do that too. So that's how people are losing custody of their parents. Although there's the woman in Southern California, Abigail Martinez, lost custody of her child for not calling her child by a male name, and that was in 2016. And
Okay. Wow. I didn't realize it was that long ago.
yeah, it was the only.
Wow. Because I know about her story. Her daughter ended up committing suicide after she was put in foster care and started I think it's testosterone. Is that correct?
Yeah, and maybe it was 2018. I might be
Right.
off. But yeah, she lost her daughter. I mean, solely
Yeah.
because of a name and a pronoun, solely. And I know this because I've read her court documents.
Wow.
And that poor woman, because I think English being her second language, and also being right at the beginning of this ideology and this movement to, um, call parents abusers for not transing their children. She had nowhere to turn. Nowhere to turn.
Yeah,
But
I
she
can't
fought.
even. Yeah. And she's speaking out, and it's so important for her to speak out, and you and others like you who have been in this position, because um, parents have to know that they can win this battle.
Yeah, and can we pivot for a minute on that,
Yeah.
because this is a really important aspect of this. Now, when I was really in it, and when my daughter was truly suffering, and they suffer. I mean, I'm not going to ever say that these kids don't feel an enormous amount of pain, because they do.
There's a
Um,
cognitive dissonance going on that's got to be really confusing.
yeah, and what I think too is, at least in my daughter's case, and looking at her phone, because I went through everything, um, she had that internet parent telling her to hate me,
Mhm.
to call me by my first name, to disengage. What a horrible thing to tell a child, that their parent doesn't love them. What a horrible, horrible thing. So the confusion in these children's heads, to be told that your parent is not supportive, is not loving, is not respectful of you, because they're not affirming you, is just beyond the pale, and must completely unwind a child. My parents don't love me? Horrible. Okay, so one of the other things that I was seeing on her on her phone and, in her social media was that there were conversations going on among trans identified 14, 13, 16-year olds where across the country, and where these girls who say that they're boys were talking about finding sugar daddies to send nude pictures to, who would then buy things for them on Amazon.
Wow.
And it was the whole instruction by one of the girls who had been doing it, and excitingly saying, I got $300 worth of, computer equipment, or, and the basis for these girls feeling comfortable, using that term very loosely, was that they were telling each other, well, you're really not a girl,
Ugh.
you're a boy. So showing your breasts isn't really showing your body, because you're not going to have them anymore anyway. So it was just like insanity looking at this and then knowing that these girls are doing it.
That is so dangerous. I mean, it's just
Unbelievable. And they don't realize that this is the gateway to sex trafficking.
and those pictures are out there forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever. And luckily my daughter was smart enough that she did not engage in that. And in fact, I'm pretty darn proud of her, because she was offering to send those girls money so that they wouldn't do it.
Oh, that's pretty darn cool.
It is cool. It
Good
is
for
cool.
her. Good for her. And for her recognizing how dangerous and what a risk that is for those girls. So that's, she still had her head on straight to some degree.
Yeah, she did. And she's a bright girl. She got hoodwinked. She got just thrown into the cult. It was just repetitive, repetitive, repetitive.
And this
You
is something that I hear detransitioners talk about. They have a lot of blame. They feel responsible and guilty, and they especially feelings towards their parents, how awful they were to their parents. And I just, it's so important for people to understand that this is a cult. Their tactics are exactly cult tactics. Their indoctrination process, and they're targeting a very vulnerable population at an incredibly susceptible age. And during COVID especially, they had a lot of influence over these kids. And so I think it's important for people to realize, if you've got a kid who's been sucked into this, if you've got a friend's kid who's been sucked into this, if detransitioners, to cut them a whole lot of slack, because they have been victimized.
You're exactly right. And I will never blame my daughter for this. This happened to her, not by her. The person I blame, in part, of course, is me. And this gets to, a really important part, because parents get bashed too for not being stronger in this. You get terribly unwound by the fact that you failed your child, that you let this happen. And parents need to kind of drop that guilt, because, it's really a David and Goliath. I was a very engaged parent. I am a very engaged
You
parent.
got volunteer of the year at your school, at your daughter's school. I mean,
Right. And I checked my kid's phone.
yeah.
She just had fake accounts. She's smarter than I am. So you're swimming against the tide.
And I do
And
I think you're right, as far as, I think parents are victims of this too. There are some parents who are actively encouraging their children to take on trans identities and seem to be getting some social cred from that. And munchy moms, or, the trans housing by proxy moms, whatever you want to call them. But in general, it's very easy to blame the parent, and especially moms have historically been blamed for stuff. And I think that we've got the CDC. Erin, the CDC is pushing this stuff. I mean, so there's, I mean, to suggest that it's the parents' fault, I think is really disingenuous. This is a societal contagion that's infected our children. And the fact that you knew enough to not accept it, to me, is testament to the fact that you're in touch with your daughter, that you're a caring mom, and that you were willing to fight back.
Yeah, and then what happens too, and this is kind of bouncing around, but so when you talk about the kids being in a cult, what happened in our case is my daughter was a really sweet kid. She was a really nice, again, she picked pansexual because she wants to be inclusive and she doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. You know, very lovely kid. They change. They morph into a child that is unrecognizable. They become hostile, cruel, mean, you know, just it's very hard to like them in that stage. You love them, but they become a monster. And you just, as a parent, you would just have to keep going back and taking your licks. You have to keep getting punched in the gut. And you have to keep loving them and fighting. And it's hard. It's hard when somebody's telling you that they hate you 24/7. It's hard when somebody's telling you that they're going to run away, they're going to kill themselves just to get back at you. They can't wait to leave until they're 18. You know, they're counting the days. It's really tough. It's tough to keep going and keep fighting for them. But the real kid is in there. You just have to pull them back out.
Yeah. In the same, I mean, this is Stephen Hassan has done a lot of research on cults, and he talks about how the cult puts on a false identity. And, you know, as someone who had gender dysphoria as a kid, it's a dissociative disorder, and it's this ideology is inducing a dissociation among kids. And your kid is there. You just have to fight tooth and nail to get him back. And unfortunately, you have the vast majority of society supporting them rather than you.
Right. But you know what? Nobody's stronger than a mom.
That's right. And you stuck with her. And I just, I'm proud of you for having endured so much. I mean, it's just, I've talked to other moms, and they say they just cried. They just felt undone. You gave birth to a daughter, you know, she's a girl.
Yep. And don't think for a second that I didn't become undone. There were many days I didn't get out of bed. There were days when I held the pills in my hand, thinking, I can't endure this. I can't watch my daughter get destroyed. I just can't. It's too painful. But I'm on the other side now, so you know I can look back and you know I'm much calmer, much more stable, and I'm able to now fight for other parents.
Well, and I'm
Which
really
is
grateful that you're doing that, because there are some parents who kind of, you know, they get their kid through it and they're like, whew, I am done. And they don't have the, you know, the stick-to-itiveness or the stubbornness or the determination to keep fighting. So do you want to talk a little bit about your efforts? Because you live in a state that is really pushing this idea. Well, I guess all states at this point
all
are.
states are. Yeah, there's no state.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, I live in
untouched.
Utah, which is one of the most conservative states in the nation, and it's been
Captured.
taken over. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. Its tentacles go far and wide. So yeah, I've become, I guess, an advocate, and following your footsteps, Erin, and many people who have gone before me. Uh, I am a registered Democrat for 30 years. I work with Republicans. I work with radical feminists. I work with lesbians. I work with evangelicalists. I work with churches. I don't really care who I work with few exceptions, as long as they're fighting and willing to help safeguard children and young people, because it doesn't end at 18. because, the 18 to 25 zone is the scariest for parents. But I'm lucky. I was able to quit my job, and I was able to dedicate all of my time to help educate people. And I'm a lead of the local parents of ROGD kids. I'm a co-lead of Our Duty. I write a lot. I testify um, in our California Congress. I do whatever I can to stop this, and I'm not going to stop. And I don't think anybody should stop until this is over.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
do
this
give a
is,
little latitude to the parents that have to bow out for a while. I get it. It's grueling. It's grueling. It's exhausting. And sometimes you want to just live your life, because my life will never be the same. I can never unsee what I've seen. I can never unhear what I've heard. I mean, the stories of Abigail Martinez, Ted Hodako, and I know many more stories. I mean, I just was on the phone last night till 11 o'clock with a parent in crisis. I feel those parents' pain.
yeah, you've lived it.
Yeah.
And
And
I,
you never,
oh, go
you
ahead.
never, you never stop.
Yeah.
I can't stop. I wish I could. I wish I had I wish I could go back to where I was ignorant about all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us, I wonder if I had known the impact this was going to have on my personal life, on my friendships, on my family relationships, if I would have come out publicly when I did. I think I still would have fought it, but I might have, had a pseudonym or done something, done it a little bit less publicly. But at the same time, I'm glad I am, because we have to fight this. I was just talking to Amy Sousa yesterday, and she was on the phone with an 80-year-old woman who has just lost access to the pool that she's gone to her whole life, because she was upset that there was a man in the locker room changing when she was in there changing, and she was called transphobic, and told that she wasn't welcome there anymore. This is happening to children. This is happening to 80-year-old women. This is happening to our athletes. This is, it's our entire society has been captured by this. And I keep thinking about COVID and how upset people were and concerned people were about COVID. To me, this is worse. I mean, children are dying. Children are being damaged for life. We don't even know what the consequences are going to be of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And the fact that we don't have epidemiologists freaking out and saying, we need to figure out what's going on. This is a huge concern. Instead, they're enabling it, just indicates that it's a belief system.
Yeah. And if there's one group I blame the medical community, because they need to be standing up. I see the parent groups. I see the lesbian groups. I see the feminist groups. I see the Christian groups. I don't see a big swatch of doctors being out there. There are some, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, but pediatricians know. They know what is going on, and they are staying silent. And it is their job to protect their patients. And what they do is they don't want to touch this. It's a hot potato. So they just give them, the kids, or the parents, the gender clinic number, not knowing what's going to happen in that gender clinic. But they know. Yeah. I know that they know what's going to happen.
I've talked to so many therapists who say, yeah, I just can't talk about it. I know it's wrong, but if I speak out, I'll lose my job. Well, if this isn't something worth losing your job for, what is?
There are more of us than there are of them. If we would just shout at the same time.
Yeah.
And they can't cancel us all. And that's, that's one thing that I do is I don't ask my parents to do anything that I haven't done first. I will go first, but you need to follow behind me, because there's safety in numbers. And
I think that's something that we've found as we started to connect. When I first started speaking out about this, I went to a pro-trans rally in my town by myself. I had no idea how dangerous that was until afterwards. And I started getting death threats and I was like, what did I step in? I had no idea. I just had a sign that said stop trans eugenics. And I thought people would be like, oh my gosh, are they doing that? We need to stop it. That's how naive I was. But that's the community that's already bought into this. The vast majority of people don't have a clue.
No, and I understand your story, but I protested in the middle of San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah.
I protested in Berkeley. I get the obligatory FUs.
Yep.
But no one has physically harmed me. I mean, I'm a 50-plus-year-old woman. If they're going to harm me, that would just be.
Yeah. I get dirty looks. I get threats. I get, occasionally people are very rude to me at the grocery store, but I've never been physically harmed. And I've never really had a sense of, I think the threats are just a way of silencing people. These are bullies. And they've been very successful at silencing people with their bullying. And that's why, I mean, you and I are both, we're older women. I'm not a very large woman. If we can stand up, everybody else can too. That's the message. So maybe you can talk about some of the efforts that you can see people engaging in that would help based on what you're doing. How can
I think there's for those who still have to stay under wraps, and there are real people, and there are people that have valid reasons that they need to stay hidden, and I get it. But there's lots that they can do. I mean, I do silly things like, and they're not silly. I shouldn't call them that. Erin, I have your book. I have your children's book. I have boxes of them. They didn't cost me a lot of money. Then thank you for that. But I distribute them to all the free libraries in my neighborhood. I put them in the public libraries. I drop them off at Starbucks. I put them in those free newspapers, boxes. I just distribute them. And, what I've recently done is with Pride Week, if I see a lot of trans flags flying, I put a package together and I send a package of information to that home.
Yeah.
Really
is it
easy.
Moving the other thing you can do is
the needle? I'll never know.
You'll never know, but it's not moving the needle. You're doing something. And you can put postcards in pockets. You can go to the library and stick a postcard in every children's book. There are very simple things you can do where nobody's going to know you did it. And it might save a child.
It might, it might pique a parent that there's another alternative. I mean, I've done things like I've gone to PFLAG meetings and pretended that I've drank the Kool-Aid, and then I start talking about, well, has anybody heard of this book? Mm-hmm. Has anybody read Abigail Schreier's Irreversible Damage, or Trans by Joyce?
Yeah.
Things like that, just to kind of poke. Mm-hmm. So you can put flyers. We put flyers on cars. One of the gals that I do a lot of things with, she goes to all of the women's sports, collegiate sports, and flyers the cars.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of small things that people can do. And actually, maybe we can talk offline about this, but we need to kind of have a place where we can post simple things that you can do.
Yeah, and we have on Advocates Protecting Children, we have a page where we're gathering ideas. And so I just need to get that posted. So maybe this will motivate me to get it posted, because there are so many, I mean, making a phone call, calling an organization like CBS that has misrepresented something, your local newspaper. These are really simple things, and you don't even have to identify yourself. But I think if you don't want to be public, but you still want to make a difference, there was a huge outcry when State Farm announced that they were supporting, I think, gender, I can't remember the organization, but they were going to donate a bunch of money to this organization that gives horrible books to children's libraries and schools. And enough people called up and said, I'm pulling my business. And you can do that. You can call Starbucks and say, you know what? I love your coffee, but I'm not coming in there again until you change your policy, because it's ridiculous. And that young people know that they can go work at Starbucks and they'll get these surgeries that they want. This is sort of, and that Starbucks is totally pushing this ideology. Target, there are other, anytime you hear about something, pick up the phone, write a letter, but let them know that you're taking your business elsewhere.
Yes. And there's power in that.
Yeah.
And tell all your friends to do it. I mean, my friends luckily have not abandoned me over this, and they're on board. And I routinely, as you receive some of them, call to actions. I probably send out 1 or 2 a week, and a lot of them are simple. And some, some are calling. One of us is testifying in the California legislature. All you have to do is call, you say your name, and it can be a fake name. I oppose this bill. That's it.
Easy.
We had 50 people call up on one bill.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to do. So can you talk about what California's newest efforts are and what you're doing to fight them? Because to me, this is, we're not allowed to talk about groomers. Apparently, Twitter and Reddit have decided that talking about grooming is hate speech. So we're not allowed to. It's sort of like they're taking the language. Anytime we come up with a way to describe what's happening, they take it from us. But to me, California has just announced, hey, we're here to undermine and sabotage every child's relationship with their parent. Come on down.
So, yeah, let me just talk about the one law that affects everyone in the country.
Mm-hmm.
It is called SB 107, and it was proposed by Senator Weiner, who has no children. Mm-hmm. And what he wants to do is create a sanctuary state in California for minors to get transgender interventions. So he says the reason why he was putting forth this legislation was to go against Texas's ban and Alabama's ban and other states' bans, but that's not what the law says. What the law permits is anyone, not just a parent, anyone can flee with a minor to California and get them gender interventions. And they are untouchable.
Wow.
By the law. So it's promoting kidnapping. It's promoting kids to run away to the state of California, because once they're on our soil here, the California courts take temporary jurisdiction over that child.
Wow.
California courts, we know, err on the side of gender affirming care. So if you have a child, let's just suppose you have parents in New York. Parents are together. They don't want their 16-year-old to get her breast removed. They think she's too young to make this decision, whatever. New York permits this type of surgery, but they say no. And in New York, you need parent consent. Daughter doesn't want to wait. She calls her aunt in California, says, can I come for a visit? She gets to California and she can get that gender intervention. And her parents have to now fight for custody back to New York. They have to fight in California courts.
Wow.
To get the custody of their child.
Wow.
And because the child is a runaway, that's a black mark against the parents. It's a black mark on whether they can control their child. So they can lose custody 100% of their child. They can lose custody 100% of their child because they refused to give her the life-saving, quote unquote, gender affirming care that she so desired.
And I'm assuming California pays for these interventions because these are minors.
Well, they do, because we have this wonderful law. Again, I think it was, well, this one wasn't done by Weiner. But we have a law that says that a child 12 and older, if they're in foster care, get to dictate their gender interventions. 12.
Oh gosh, I think about when I was 12 and
oh my God, 12.
Yeah,
So they get
to have that kind of power, and incentive to run away. I mean, this whole ideology teaches these kids that their parents are awful. And what a great way to get back at your parents, to
Yep.
not to mention that, any influencer on social media could say, hey, meet me at the Stop and Shop and I'll take you to California.
That's right.
That's
That,
incredibly, I mean,
that's right. And what happens to these kids when they get here?
wow.
So they go into foster care. And again, these are probably teenagers. And our foster care system here lets the kids come and go as they please. It's open season for sex traffickers. And of course, these are vulnerable kids.
Right.
They're not mentally well. I mean, let's be very clear. A child who is gender dysphoric or gender incongruent, or whatever word we want to use.
Or a normal child who's been convinced that they're in the wrong body because they don't adhere to regressive sex-based stereotypes.
None of them just have that. None of them. They all have comorbid mental health issues.
Right.
100% of them are suffering from anxiety, depression, OCD, ASD. And so these are a very vulnerable population. They get into foster care. They get to do what they want with their bodies on California taxpayers' dime. And so every parent in this nation should be calling their lawmakers, their local ones, their attorney general, and California, and saying, no, do not pass this law.
Yeah, California does not have the right to usurp the rest of the country to take their parental. I mean, this, to me, this is horrifying. And if it goes through, the precedent that's set is shocking. And California is, I mean, I can't even imagine the mess it's going to be in. But this is a state that also has doctors at gender clinics that talk about sex work as if it's a normal thing for a child to engage in prostitution in order to, support themselves. So we're, this is a state where drug use has been very much normalized. And so we're going to have hordes of kids who are already incredibly vulnerable showing up and just being at the mercy of the most vile individuals there to take advantage of them.
Yep. And we're paying for it.
Wow.
We're paying for it. We're paying to harm children.
And this in light of this morning, Erin, some good news out of the UK. So as we are descending into this hell, the UK is coming up and saying, we're going to close the Tavistock clinic because it was harming children. So how do we get some sanity here? The UK kind of went through this and came out the other side. It seems like we are just
ignoring it.
Yeah.
Ignoring what our friends across the pond already know. Yes, we are ignoring it. But I think as much as I bash the mainstream media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they are dipping their toe into this a little bit. Certainly over the last 2 years, they have at least given us some voice. It's not always accurate. It's not always the full picture. And they don't do their investigative work. Like they'll spotlight a doctor. I'm like, have you looked at what this doctor, who she is? Diane Aronsav?
Yeah, this is an insane doctor who talks about infants signaling that they're born in the wrong body by undoing their onesie or pulling a barrette out of their hair. I mean, this is
right, but she's getting spotlighted, and she's also, believed in the satanic panic. Like she has no credibility.
No, but somehow she's got incredible power in this movement. I mean, that's again where it feels so much more like a religion, because competency is not what moves people up. It's adherence to the belief.
The New York Times, the last article they wrote, spotlighted WPATH. WPATH promotes eunuchs.
Yes. And the eunuchs that they're using to advise them are involved in pedophilic groups.
Yes.
So we're not just making this up. Yeah.
Why would you spotlight that? Why wouldn't you investigate what is WPATH? They also, they promote 14-year-olds getting their breasts cut off. Yeah. I mean, Really?
or putting children on puberty blockers that takes away their sexual function and basically shrinks their genitalia and sort of freezes them in a child's body. Yeah, and I think it's important. One of the things that I hear all the time is that this is, the pushback is coming from, kooky, crazy conservatives who believe in QAnon. And I don't know, Erin, it sounds like we have pretty similar backgrounds. I donated to Amnesty International. I volunteered for Planned Parenthood. I donate to Doctors Without Borders. I am not a crazy QAnon supporter.
Yeah, well, and the majority of the parents in my group, and I would say 90% were Democrats or are Democrats.
Homeless
And
Democrats.
yeah, and we get misgendered. I mean, when I would go out and protest, I actually made a shirt that I put on the back, Democrat, because I've been misgendered as, a right-wing evangelicalist.
Right.
And because it's name calling, it's easy. But what they don't know is that there are hordes of people like me out there who are voting red this time. And
I know it's a very strange feeling to have
yeah,
been a lifelong Democrat and
yep.
to feel like I cannot vote for Biden after what he's done since he's gotten in office. There is no way I can vote for him. He has systematically erased women, erased girls, erased mothers. And as in supporting, because there's something, he put out an executive order recently that talked about expanding support for non-biological, non-legal families. He's talking about glitter families. He's talking about normalizing and legitimizing
Oh my
glitter
God.
families. Yeah. People who don't know the lingo aren't going to pick up on that, but those of us who know what's going on see exactly what he's talking about. And it's glitter families. He's trying to normalize and legalize and legitimize glitter families.
And what they're not realizing is Democrats aren't having it.
Yeah.
And even in San Francisco, I mean, we ousted the school board because they were too woke. We're done. We're done with this nonsense. And it's starting to swing back a little bit in, I guess, higher education, but SATs matter. AP classes matter.
Yeah, as long as they don't get rid of those as being, somehow bigoted or.
But they did. I mean, they took away the best high school in San Francisco. It was a public high school. They basically dismantled it. It was for gifted kids, and these kids are extremely intelligent because it wasn't inclusive enough.
Wow.
Well, it's not supposed to be. I wouldn't have gotten into that school. It's supposed to be the best of the brightest.
Right.
And they dismantled it, and the parents weren't having it. And the ideologues need to know, and the Democratic Party need to know, you're messing with families, and that crosses into every group. Yeah. Immigrants will be standing with
evangelicals and
yes,
and yeah, and lesbians and
correct,
gays, and we're all standing together. And this has been something that's very, very interesting is, I've never spent a lot of time around evangelicals or conservatives, and it's been really interesting because they're the ones who are willing to host me to speak and who are really asking, what can we do? How can we fight this? And it's been really, initially it was very uncomfortable because I was like, oh, they're the enemy. Yeah. But now I'm like, nope, they're no longer the enemy. They're fighting the battle that needs to be fought.
And that's the silver lining a little bit on this. Yeah. It's the silver lining because something happened in our country where we became Team A and Team B.
That's right.
And it's very, very important for us to have these conversations. Even if we don't agree with 90% of what the other person's saying, it humanizes these issues. And I mean, I do not like Donald Trump, but I sat next to, a Trumper thumper, and we had a great conversation, and that needs to happen more. And that's been
one of the most amazing things is I've learned that, I may not like Donald Trump, but I certainly like some people who like Donald Trump.
Correct.
I've really, and that's been really good for me because I think I was in a silo. I was very much like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, they're the bad guys. And now I'm talking to people that I never have talked to in the past. And I'm finding out that they're people. Some of them are good, some of them not so good. Some of them I get along with, some of them not, but they're people. They're not the enemy.
They're people, and the vast majority of them love their children unconditionally
Yes, exactly.
and
They
will
want,
do anything for their children
yeah.
and their grandchildren.
And other people's children if they need help.
Correct. Everybody knows. Yeah.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you, Erin. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we close this off?
No, but I just wanted to thank you, you and Maria, from the bottom of my heart, because I will admit that your book, Detrans, Desist, Detox, and your podcast is what gave me the language to pull my daughter from this.
That really means
And
a lot.
yeah, well, thank you. And it's true. I always recommend your podcasts and your book, because you gave me the words. I needed the words. I lost my words. I lost my confidence.
Well, and that's something that we need to give back to parents. Actually, this is a little off topic, but I'm in the process of publishing a Parenting in a Transgender World handbook for parents to hopefully get them the information before their kids are even sucked into this. Because I feel like they need the language. They need to understand. If they don't have a schema for what's going on, they're not going to be able to fight it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. In my free time, I've been thinking about making a 2-page brochure that we can hand out at the TK and kindergarten pickup,
Oh,
to
yeah.
put parents, to warn them and to give them tools, because there's a lot of things parents can do early on, which is check out the books on the bookshelf in your teacher's room.
Yeah.
And what books to look for, and volunteer for the book fair, and don't opt out of all sex ed. It's not going to save you from everything, but be in that classroom all the time.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, that's the one
exactly.
thing, as I tell parents, if you can't pull your kids from school, find a way to have somebody in there so that they know you're there, so that you're watching and you're hearing and you're seeing, and your kids know that you're there.
Yeah, don't assume anything. And I don't want to throw again all the teachers under the bus, because there are some good teachers out there. A lot of them, they just don't know too. They're told, and they believe, because that's all they read, is that if they don't support a child, the child's going to commit suicide. And they don't dig any deeper. Why would they? They trust their administration. They trust the New York Times. They trust CNN and they're not even looking at WPAD,
Yeah.
but they're just what they're reading in the newspaper, and what they're seeing on TV, and our own president saying, this is what you're supposed to do. What teacher's going to say, well, no, actually, I don't think I should be doing that.
Yeah.
If they don't know.
If they don't
So
know.
it's our job to educate them.
Exactly. Well, I really appreciate all you're doing. You've inspired me. I've been following what you've been doing, and I just I'm cheering you on, and I'm so thankful that you stuck with it with your daughter, and now you're helping other people too.
Well, thank you, Erin. Thanks for having me.